The stadium erupts. 80,000 people rise to their feet simultaneously. Strangers embrace. Grown men weep. Children scream with a joy so pure it bypasses language entirely. Across the globe, in living rooms, in bars, on streets lit up by screens, billions of human beings are locked into a single, shared moment of collective electricity. And then, there is you. Sitting still, watching the spectacle unfold, feeling absolutely nothing. Not boredom, not contempt, not even mild irritation at the noise. Just a calm, quiet absence where the emotion is supposed to be. While the world loses itself in a fever of national pride and sporting passion, your inner landscape remains unchanged, undisturbed, almost eerily composed. The question everyone around you is silently asking, and maybe the question you have asked yourself, is this: what is wrong with me? Here is the truth that this script is built to deliver. Nothing is wrong with you. But something is profoundly, fascinatingly different. And understanding that difference is the beginning of something far more valuable than a goal celebration. The World Cup as a psychological event. Before we examine the people who feel nothing, we must first understand what the World Cup actually is, not as a sporting competition, but as a mass psychological phenomenon. The FIFA World Cup is, by measurable data, the most watched and most emotionally activating event in human history. Over 5 billion people engaged with the 2022 Qatar edition alone. That number is not just a viewership statistic. It represents 5 billion nervous systems simultaneously flooded with cortisol, dopamine, and oxytocin, the neurochemicals of stress, reward, and social bonding. This is precisely what makes the World Cup so powerful. It is not merely a game. It is a collective ritual, one of the last remaining experiences in a fragmented, individualized modern world where enormous numbers of human beings feel the same emotion at the same time. For the same reason, anthropologists compare it to ancient tribal ceremonies. Neuroscientists describe it as synchronous brain activity on a planetary scale. When a nation scores, the collective gasp that follows is not metaphorical. Neurologically, it is a shared event. Mirror neurons, the brain's empathy infrastructure, fire in near unison across a crowd, creating a feedback loop of emotional amplification. One person's joy becomes 10 people's joy, becomes 10,000 people's joy, becomes a billion people's joy. For most human beings, this is irresistible. It bypasses logic. It bypasses preference. It operates at a level beneath conscious choice, but not for everyone. The minds that remain unmoved for a specific segment of the population, the World Cup lands like any other event, observed, processed, and filed away without emotional residue. These are not people who are trying to be different. They are not performing indifference to appear intellectual. They are not contrarians performing detachment as a personality trait. They are people whose psychology is genuinely, structurally oriented differently. Psychologists identify several overlapping frameworks that explain this experience. Alexithymia, a condition characterized by difficulty identifying and processing emotions, affects an estimated 10% of the global population. For these individuals, collective emotional events do not produce the expected internal response, not because the events lack significance, but because the emotional translation mechanism functions differently. Beyond clinical definitions, research in social identity theory reveals that not all people construct their self-concept around group membership. For some individuals, often those scoring high in traits like openness, analytical thinking, and introversion, identity is primarily internal, not collective. When a nation scores, they do not experience it as "we scored." The pronoun simply does not attach. This leads us to 3 distinct psychological profiles, 3 kinds of people who sit quietly while the world erupts. We will call them the rational detacher, the identity-independent thinker, and the emotionally reserved. Each of these profiles carries its own architecture of thought, its own internal logic, and critically, its own quiet strength that the noise of the stadium cannot accommodate. They are not absent from the moment. They are simply experiencing it from a place most people never access. While the world paints its face in national colors, something quieter is happening in the minds of those who simply watch. Not emptiness, not apathy, not failure. something rarer than celebration, clarity. The people who feel nothing during the World Cup are not malfunctioning humans in need of repair. They are, in many ways, the most honest people in the room. They do not perform. They do not manufacture enthusiasm to satisfy a social contract they never signed. In a world addicted to performed emotion, where reactions are exaggerated for cameras, where grief becomes content and joy becomes spectacle, the person who sits quietly and feels genuinely nothing may be the most psychologically authentic individual in the building. That is not a consolation. That is a finding. The three profiles fully revealed the rational detacher is someone whose brain has a powerful, almost involuntary tendency to analyze before it feels. When a goal is scored, while others experience a rush of pure emotion, the rational detacher's mind is already elsewhere, processing the tactical geometry of the play, questioning the referee's positioning, or simply noting the event without assigning it personal weight. These individuals are not cold. They feel deeply but selectively and almost always about things they have personally chosen to invest in. Their emotional energy is not absent. It is conserved. Reserved for what they have decided, not what culture has decided for them, truly matters. The identity-independent thinker represents perhaps the most misunderstood profile of the three. These are individuals who fundamentally do not experience themselves as extensions of a group. When a national team wins, the word "we" does not register emotionally. There is no collective self to celebrate through. This is not detachment from humanity, it is simply a different architecture of selfhood. Research consistently shows that identity-independent individuals tend to demonstrate stronger resistance to groupthink, higher scores in critical reasoning, and a remarkably stable sense of self that does not expand or collapse based on external outcomes. The football result changes nothing about who they are, because who they are was never negotiated through the scoreboard. The emotionally reserved individual feels, often intensely, but not publicly and frequently not on demand. The World Cup's emotional structure is essentially coercive. It arrives at a scheduled time, demands a specific type of feeling, and expects that feeling to be performed visibly. For the emotionally reserved, emotion does not work on a timetable. It arrives privately, unexpectedly, and on its own terms. These individuals may be moved to genuine tears by a piece of music heard alone at midnight, or by a stranger's small act of kindness witnessed on an ordinary Tuesday. But a scripted global event, regardless of its scale, cannot manufacture that internal movement. Their emotional world is not smaller, it is simply ungovernable, and that is not a flaw. That is sovereignty. The hidden cost nobody talks about here is what rarely gets discussed: the psychological burden carried by these individuals during every major collective event. The pressure to pretend, the exhausting performance of enthusiasm they do not feel, the quiet guilt of watching everyone around them vibrate with joy while their own interior remains calm. The whispered fear, am I broken? Am I less human somehow? Why can't I just enjoy this like everyone else? That weight is real, and it deserves to be named. Because what these individuals are experiencing is not emotional poverty. It is emotional nonconformity. And in a world that constantly demands you feel what it tells you to feel, when it tells you to feel it, nonconformity of this kind requires a quiet, underestimated form of courage. What the science actually confirms: researchers studying emotional selectivity and low group identity individuals have documented consistent patterns worth paying close attention to. These individuals tend to demonstrate elevated capacity for independent judgment, the ability to assess a situation without the distortion of collective pressure. They show stronger long-term emotional regulation, meaning they are less susceptible to the crashes that follow collective highs. They experience what psychologists call intrinsic emotional coherence. Their inner states are more consistently aligned with their genuine values rather than their social environment. In short, they are not feeling less, they are feeling more accurately. The reframe that changes everything here is the shift this video is asking you to make, not just intellectually, but in how you carry yourself. The world will always have its stadiums, its synchronized screams, its choreographed euphoria. And there is genuine beauty in that. The human capacity for collective joy is one of the most extraordinary things our species produces. But a world made entirely of people who feel what they are told to feel, when they are told to feel it, is a world without independent thought, without honest witness, without the quiet, clear-eyed observers who watch the spectacle and ask the questions the crowd is too intoxicated to ask. Every great movement in human history, every scientific breakthrough, every philosophical revolution, every act of moral courage was initiated by someone who did not simply go along with what the collective was feeling. Someone who remained still while the world rushed forward. Someone who, in their stillness, could see what the noise was obscuring. You are not broken because you sat quietly while the stadium roared. You are not less human because the scoreboard did not move you. You are not missing something. You may in fact be protecting something, a rare internal compass that points not toward what is loudest but toward what is true. Own that, protect it. Do not apologize for it. The world has billions of people who can celebrate on cue. It has far fewer who can think clearly when everyone else has stopped. A question for you before you close this video. I want to leave you with something to sit with, genuinely sit with, not scroll past. Think back to the last time the world told you to feel something, and you simply didn't. What were you actually thinking in that moment of stillness? And looking back now, was the crowd right, or were you? Write your answer in the comments, not to perform it, not to get likes. But because self-knowledge, honest, unfiltered self-knowledge, is the rarest thing a human being can practice in a world that never stops telling you how to feel. The stadium will always be loud. The real question is, what do you hear when it goes quiet?